All right. Welcome everyone to today's webinar Quality of Service for Kubernetes with Calico. Let's start off with a bit of an introduction. So yeah, my name is Adil Abdul Majid. I'm a senior product manager here at Tigera, and today with me I have my colleague Pedro. I'll hand it over to Pedro to introduce himself.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm a software engineer at Tigera.
Thanks, Pedro. So yeah, I think next we can look at the agenda for this session. So we're going to start off by introducing quality of service controls in Calico and cover a little bit of theory so that you have a good handle on the controls that are available in Calico and the parameters that you can configure for each of the controls to achieve the desired result. Okay. And then for each of the controls, so for each of the controls, bandwidth, packet rate limits, and number of connections, Pedro will do a demo that highlights how these controls can be configured and deployed in your Kubernetes environments. Okay. So let's look at QoS in Calico. Now, when you look at Kubernetes, it's a shared resource, right? That's why you deploy Kubernetes to optimally utilize the resources that are available to you by deploying multiple workloads in a given node in a cluster. And in any shared environment, you have to ensure that you have some controls to make sure that resources are adequately allocated, to enforce some controls around resource utilization and to prevent abuse, right? So in Kubernetes, if you look at CPU and memory, you can define resource requests and resource limits. So a resource request is the amount of CPU and memory a workload can request from the cluster, and resource limits are caps that you can enforce so that workloads don't exceed the caps that you have specified. Now, the same must be considered for the network as well. Yes, the networking resources in the cluster or a node in a cluster are limited. So when you look at bandwidth, there is a maximum bandwidth that a node has. If you look at the number of connections, there are a maximum number of connections that a node can maintain at a given point in time. So defining these limits or quality of service controls helps you address noisy neighbor problems and provides you the ability to guarantee some SLAs for your clients or users or customers who've deployed workloads in the cluster. Okay. So for quality of service, Calico supports 3 controls today: bandwidth, packet rate limit, and number of connections. So bandwidth is the bit rate in and out of a given workload in a Kubernetes cluster. You can specify that in both directions. Packet rate limit, which is different from bandwidth, are the number of packets that can be sent or received by a pod. So for example, if you look at an attack such as a DDoS attack, you see a large number of malformed packets, right? So in those instances, it might be useful to enforce a packet rate limit. And the number of connections or the number of active connections that can be maintained at a given point in time by a given workload. Okay. So next up, let's look at each of these controls in a little bit more detail. And like I mentioned before, Pedro will do a demo for each of those. All right, Pedro, over to you.
Sure. Yeah. For a bit of technical detail, let's just give you an overview of token bucket filter algorithm, which is basically what we use for the rate limits. So for bandwidth and packet rate limits. You can look at the picture here, and we imagine a bucket of tokens. These small yellow things are tokens here, and for a unit, like a given what you consider a unit, for example, a packet to be processed or transmitted, it needs to spend a token. So what happens is, for example, let's say for bandwidth, each bit is a token. So say you have a packet of the size of like 1,000 bits to be sent, or 1,000 bytes, so it's 8,000 bits. You need your bucket to have more than 8,000 tokens for that to happen. Otherwise, the packet is queued here and is awaiting for the bucket to fill up. By making sure this way, we can make sure that the rate at which we transmit is equals, or on average will equal the rate of that we fill the bucket, which is the exact parameter that we put in for the limits. A part of that, another concept is the burst size, which can be pictured as the size of the bucket, and that the bucket begins full. So it means even though you can have like a low rate, if you have like a very large bucket, initially you're going to have transmissions at high rates until that bucket is empty, and then you'll fall back to just the rate that you're enforcing. And both of these are configurable. We can we'll show them in more detail, like what they actually reflect on our controls. Starting with the bandwidth limits. So yeah, basically the bandwidth limit is, for example, is configured in bits per second. That will be the rate that you're configuring the token bucket filter. And the burst size, which is what usually what happens if you configure the burst size, is you'll have that burst at the line rate, or the maximum transmission rate that you can achieve. But there is also a third parameter, the peak rate, which is a limit on the transmission of burst. So you don't want, if in case you don't want your burst to go at line rate, you can also specify a limit of that. These can be applied on both, like independently for egress and ingress traffic, so traffic out of the pod and into the pod. And there is a buffer calculated from these burst size, these parameters. The packets that are exceeding this the bandwidth, they're queued for transmission when they're able in a manner that respects the limits. Going to the next slide, we can see here how we configure these limits is via annotations on the pods. You can also have that, for example, here as the template in the deployment that will ultimately be reflected as an annotation on the pod. What happens is we configured egress traffic for a maximum bandwidth of 100 megabits per second and a burst of 100 megabits. So that will be the burst size of the token here. So yeah, let's switch to the.
So Pedro, before you go to the demo, yes. Just to do a small clarification. So the burst size here is 300 megabits per second, right? And the egress bandwidth is 100.
300 megabits, not per second. So it's just the size of the bucket here. Yeah. So yeah, for the demo, we have this. I put stuff in a repo on GitHub, but basically for bandwidth controls, we got I'm using iPerf3 both as a client and a server to generate traffic. This first YAML you see here, there's no annotations whatsoever, so we'll just have a line rate transmission. So let's do just that. Hang on. Yeah. So you can see here that we created, there's an iPerf server deployment with just one replica and their clients all around. And we can do iPerf3-c.
Pedro, would you be able to zoom your screen a bit?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Yeah, that looks much better. Thanks.
And this will connect to the server and just generate traffic at unlimited, or so we can see here that we have about like a little bit under 5 gigabits per second. That's the whole network. So as there's nothing else using the resources.
Right.
So now let us apply. Actually, let me show.
Yeah, if you could zoom this screen a bit as well.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah. You're right.
Yeah.
So let's show. Now, basically, we have the same YAML here, but with the 100 megabits per second bandwidth limit and a burst size of 300 megabits. So let us apply that. And then you can see now you can see we have the traffic chopped up in intervals. We do like 10 seconds test at the end here. We have an aggregate of everything, but we have snapshots, and we can see that the first interval, we're going quite above our limit of 100 megabits per second. That's because we're using up our allotted burst size. After that is depleted, you see we kind of fluctuate at like a little bit above, a little bit below. There is this configuration on iPerf to omit the first, let's say, 3 seconds. So those won't be counted in the average. We can use that as kind of a warm-up. And at the end of the test, we'll see here that we have the bit rate at like really almost to the
closer to what you specified, basically.
What we specified is, yes, 100 megabits per second.
So the first burst that you see there is because of, you're starting off with a bucket of 300,
Exactly, yes. We have a bucket of 300 that fills 100 every second.
Right.
So that's why we're getting approximately 400. We get, like, if we had a bigger burst, we would have more until we hit the limit of the network, which is about 5 gigabits per second.
Got it.
So moving back here, now we can test a peak rate, which is yet another.
I think, Pedro, before you go to the peak rate,
go to the slide of the peak rate, right? Yeah, you're right. Let's move here. For the peak rate, this is a bit of a technical detail, but it's also nice. It is implemented as a second token bucket filter, in which the peak rate is the parameter that token is filled. And there's this optional parameter, min burst size, which we default to the interface MTU. The only caveat there is it shouldn't be smaller than the interface MTU, otherwise we don't get any transmissions. But Calico doesn't allow you to do that. It auto detects the MTU, and if you try to pick something smaller, it will default to the MTU size. So, for example, here, if we want an egress peak rate of 200 megabits, it means that our burst will not go over the 200 megabits per second. So let's switch, or rather, let me show you here. This is the extra line from the previous YAML. So let's just go here and apply our third YAML with peak rate. Let's wait because the deployments will update. And now let's again omit first 3 seconds. You can see here that the initial bursts here were not going over the 200 megabits per second that we allotted for a peak rate. And then we're getting around, like, we still had a bit of burst, like just a little bit left in the bucket, while still on our when counting. But yeah, on average, we're at 101 megabits per second. So you can see.
Right. So it looks like it kind of smoothen out the burst instead of transmitting
exactly, yeah,
the entire bucket. Yeah.
And yeah, this way you can basically not have any, like, just one pod hogging all of the network resources.
Right.
And that's it for bandwidth. So on to packet rate limits. That also uses a token bucket filter algorithm. But it basically, the unit is no longer a bit or a byte, but a single packet. We do have a configurable optional burst size as well. The packet rate limit is defined in packets per second. You can use quantifiers like kilo packets per second for 1,000 and mega for, or actually you can use mega because just there's a limitation on the maximum number that you can use that. So yeah, but you can use 1K for 1,000, for example. Also applied on ingress and egress. The main difference is that packets are not queued when they exceed the rate, so they're dropped, and that also makes it so it doesn't make sense to have a configurable peak rate for that. Annotations work pretty much the same. That's how you configure it. And no, it's more like I wanted to make an observation when you were talking about like why have both bandwidth and packet rate limits. But yeah, it's because as you said, like for example, DDoS attacks or ICMP flooding, these are attacks that you use a large number of small size packets, and that can be possible even if you have like a reasonable bandwidth limit. That can still allow for an attack that floods the network with small packets. So that's why it makes sense to have a control for packet rate as well. So for the packet rate demo, yeah, let me first show here our YAML. So for packet rate, we're using iPerf2 to use UDP. This first YAML has no limit, and then we have another one, let me show you already, just with the egress packet rate of 100. For it, I'll need to copy the command here for the iPerf. But basically, yeah, we're going to use UDP and a packet size of 1,000 bytes. So by limiting it to 100 packets per second, we should be seeing 100 kbps on the iPerf output. So let's first use no limit. Let's wait for the image to show up. And so this is we're using UDP, right? So we're requesting a 200 megabits per second transmission. That's why the first the intervals here are just what's reported by the sender, and then in the end we have a server report, which is what the server received. So it did, in this case, it did receive the 200 megabits per second, had 0% loss. So right. Now let's apply our limits. Wait until all the clients are back. What I meant to say is that, yeah, we'll still see 200 megabits per second as the traffic generated at the beginning. What we should care about here is the server report at the end of the 10-second interval, which we see here is 800 kilobits per second. So that the math checks out. It's 100 times or 100 packets per second times 1000 bytes packets times 8 bits per byte. That adds up to multiplies to 800K. So again, we can see that it's sort of working. So let's clean that up.
So in that case, Pedro, you applied the control in the egress direction, but the same control can be applied on the ingress direction as well if you want to throttle the number of packets that can be sent towards a workload.
Yes, absolutely. Right. It would mean that the packets are going to be dropped by the receiver before, like by Calico, before the workload sees them. But yes, you absolutely can also use that for ingress. Same with bandwidth as well. We can limit ingress as well as egress.
Right.
Just for the sake of time, we picked one.
Yeah.
Last control is maximum number of connections, which is not a rate. So there's no token bucket filter here. It's just number of established connections or TCP sessions, if you will. With this, we can apply like a limit of any arbitrary number that we want up to limit the connection limits, or the number of connections for both, like for ingress, so a server accepting connections, or for egress, so a client trying to connect. Once this maximum is reached, the new connections are rejected. So you can use this for a server to protect it against being overwhelmed by connection requests or by clients. Or you can use also this on egress on pods to kind of limit the activity that a rogue pod can try to establish like a bunch of connections. Again, this is configured as an annotation. You can also use quantifiers for like kilo for 100, mega for 1,000, or kilo for 1,000, mega for 1,000,000, and so on. Yeah, let's go to the demo of it. Let me show the YAML. For max connections, what I'm using is an Nginx server pod, and then a client that has both netcat, which is I'm just using to have a dangling connection to port 80, and curl just to have a regular, like a proper HTTP session. And first, we're going to have no limits, and then we're going to apply just again egress, but we could have the same limitation as an ingress on the server, but maximum of 4 connections, which means that any connection above 4 would be rejected. So let's first apply our no limit scenario. So we have the Nginx server and these Netshoot pods. Just wait until they're ready. We have them running. So if we do a curl on the Nginx service, we just see this here. And if I just wanted to show, like if we do an netcat to port 80 on Nginx, we can manually send an HTTP request here. But if we don't, the connection is just left open. It'll time out in like a few minutes. But for testing here, this works in that I can do so now what I did was I opened 4 HTTP sessions and they're left running or with the pod now, and I can still curl Nginx and have a response, right?
Right.
But let's now apply our limits, which is 4 connections, if you folks remember. So again, just curly nginx, you get a response. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now this is the 5th connection attempt. And we just have an error, cannot connect to server.
Right.
I see the jobs here. Let's bring up one and kill it. And now try curl again. And again, we can't connect now because there's only like 3 connections. That's basically it for demos. That's our last YAML.
Yeah, perfect.
Any questions that folks might have?
Yeah, no, thanks, Pedro, for those demos. I think your repository, I believe, is publicly available. We can share a link to the audience.
It is, yes. Oh, yeah, and also one thing that's maybe interesting to show is the networking docs for QoS control, the Calico docs for QoS controls, where you can see examples and explanations of functionality, the limits, default values, everything for the annotations. Yeah, this is something that we can also link.
Yep. No, perfect. Yeah, we'll add those links to this webinar, and I hope the audience found this useful. I hope they try it out. This is available in Calico open source, I believe, starting 3:30. And
yes.
Yep. And do try it out and let us know if you have any further questions. You can reach us in the Calico open source Slack group. And let us know if you have any feedback. I hope you find these features to be useful in your environments. All right, so that's it for this webinar, everyone. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.